They say dogs are man's best friend, but they are also our first line of defense against the things we cannot see. Tonight, we explore 3 terrifying true stories that prove our canine companions see much more than we realize. Welcome to the Shadows. Story 1. The Guardian's Scar. It was a stormy October night, the kind where the wind sounds like a low, rhythmic moan. Sarah was home alone with her German Shepherd, Major. He was usually a gentle giant, but as the clock struck midnight, his demeanor shifted. Major stood before the bedroom door, his chest vibrating with a low, guttural growl that Sarah had never heard before. Then she saw it. A silhouette passing the window, a tall, hooded figure lurking in the downpour, searching for a way inside. The glass shattered. The intruder lunged, but Major was faster. He threw himself into the path of a blade meant for his owner. By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone, leaving only a trail of fear and a brave dog with a scar he would wear forever. Story 2. The Thing in the Window. This takes us back to a rural village in the mid-90s, a place of tall grass and quiet secrets. Young Leo noticed his dog, Zozo, acting strangely. The dog would sit for hours, staring at the old oak tree behind their property. One night, Leo woke to a strange sound, a rhythmic whispering. He crept to the living room and froze in absolute terror. Zozo was standing on his hind legs like a human. His back was stiff, his paws pressed against the window glass, staring out into the void. The dog was whispering in a deep, gravelly man's voice. When he turned to look at Leo, his eyes weren't animal at all. Leo never looked at his dog the same way again. Some things that look like pets might just be wearing their skin. Story 3. The Basement Warning. In a modern suburban home, a man named Mark decided to move his bedroom to the basement. But his 2 dogs, usually inseparable from him, refused to follow. They stood at the top of the stairs, whimpering in the dark. Night after night, Mark heard scratching, not from the floor, but from inside the concrete walls. A dry, persistent scraping. One night, he felt a presence. Standing at the foot of his bed was a tall, pale figure, its limbs elongated and its face a featureless mask. Suddenly, the dogs upstairs began to bark with a primal fury. As their howls echoed through the vents, the figure vanished into the air. Mark moved back upstairs that same night. He realized then that his dogs weren't afraid of the basement. They were afraid for him. Dogs see what we cannot. They hear the whispers in the walls and feel the breath of the things that hide in the dark. Next time your dog stares at an empty corner, don't just ignore it. Look again. You might not be as alone as you think. It was the humid summer of 1994, a time when the rural nights in Ohio felt heavy and the silence was thick with unspoken secrets. My dog, Zozo, had always been my silent protector, a shaggy mixed breed who rarely left my side during the long, dark hours. But that night, the atmosphere in the room changed. The air grew cold, and a strange, electric tension began to hum against my skin. I lay there, pretending to be deep in sleep, while my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against the mattress. Something was fundamentally wrong. Zozo wasn't lying down. He was sitting bolt upright, his entire body stiff, staring with an unnerving intensity at the darkened window pane. As the clock on the wall ticked toward midnight, I watched a transformation that would haunt my waking hours for the rest of my life. Zozo didn't bark or growl. Instead, he began to rise, his front paws lifting off the hardwood floor with a slow, deliberate graze. He stood on his hind legs, mimicking a human's posture. The sound of his bones popping and shifting echoed through the silent room. His shadow stretched across the wallpaper, a long, spindly shape that looked less like a canine and more like a nightmare from another world. His ears were pinned back flat against his skull, and he continued to stare into the woods as if expecting a guest to arrive. Then, the sounds began. Te werelu, guttural vibrations that seemed to emanate from deep within his chest, vibrating the very air. It was a horrific mimicry of human speech, broken syllables and wet, gasping sounds that formed words I couldn't quite understand, yet deeply feared. I lay paralyzed, beads of cold sweat forming on my forehead, watching as my childhood companion turned into something entirely alien. The dog's neck began to twist. Slowly, with a series of sickening clicks, his head turned a full 180 degrees toward me. As the moonlight hit his face, I saw that his eyes had changed. They were no longer the warm, brown eyes of my pet. The pupils were shaped like a human's, glowing with a sinister, sickly yellow light that seemed to burn through the darkness. He towered over me, standing tall on his hind legs, a predator in the skin of a friend, watching me with a cold, calculating intelligence. Suddenly, the window glass rattled violently in its frame. Something outside, deep in the woods, was trying to get inside my room. The dog turned back to the window and let out a sound that shattered the silence, a horrific, high-pitched fusion of a scream and a howl. The world seemed to dissolve into shadow. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the sun to rise and end this waking nightmare. By dawn, the room was empty. The window was wide open, and the cold morning wind blew the curtains, like ghosts in the morning light. They say a dog is a man's best friend. But after that night, I only have one question for you. Is it still your dog? Most people think dogs bark at random things. Shadows. Sounds. Nothing. That's what I used to believe too, until the night my dog reacted to something that I couldn't see, and then it moved. This happened about a year ago. I live alone in a small apartment just outside Portland. Nothing special. One bedroom, a narrow hallway, and a living room. It's quiet. Almost too quiet sometimes. The only reason I never felt completely alone was because of my dog, Max. Max is a German Shepherd. Big, alert, and usually very calm. He's not the type to bark for no reason. It started small. One night, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when I noticed Max sitting near the hallway entrance. Not lying down, not relaxed, just sitting completely still. His ears were stiff, his eyes locked forward. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring down the hallway. I remember calling his name. Max. Nothing. No reaction. The hallway was dark, just the faint light from the living room spilling into it. There was nothing there. No movement, no sound. But the next night, it happened again. Same spot, same posture, same intense stare. Except this time, it lasted longer. I tried distracting him, called his name, clapped my hands, even grabbed his favorite toy. Nothing worked. He wouldn't move. That's when I started feeling it too. That quiet tension, that strange pressure in the air. Like something wasn't right. Over the next few nights, it got worse. Max stopped going near the hallway completely. He would walk around it, avoid it. If I went into the bedroom, he wouldn't follow anymore. He would just sit in the living room, waiting, watching. One night, I decided to test something. I turned off all the lights, sat on the couch, and waited. Max was next to me. At first, everything was normal. Then, slowly, I felt it again. That same pressure. He stood up and walked toward the hallway. But this time, he didn't stop at the entrance. He took one step in and then froze. His tail lowered. His ears pulled back slightly. And then he started backing up. Slowly, without turning around. That's when I felt it. That sharp, cold sensation running down my spine. Because Max wasn't reacting to nothing, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointed it straight down the hallway. Empty. But Max kept staring. And then he let out a low growl. Not loud. Just warning. That's when I heard it. A sound, very faint, like something shifting. For just a split second, I saw it. Something in the darkness. Just a shape. A darker shadow. Moving against the wall. Max suddenly barked. Loud, sharp, and then everything went silent. The pressure disappeared. Just like that. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with all the lights on. Max didn't take his eyes off that hallway once. I set up a small camera facing the hallway that night. I told myself it was just to prove I was imagining things. At around 2:17 a.m., the camera captured everything. Movement, slow, subtle. Something passed across the hallway opening. Something tall. And then the footage glitched. Just for a second, but when it came back, the hallway was empty again. That Saturday, I packed my things. I didn't try to explain it. I just left, because whatever was in that hallway, it wasn't random, it wasn't nothing. And it definitely wasn't alone. Even now, Max still reacts sometimes. He'll stop, stare at something behind me. Something I can't see, and I don't turn around anymore, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and sometimes it moves. This is story 4. I used to think dogs barked for attention, or at noises we just couldn't hear. That's what I told myself, until the night my dog refused to come inside, and I realized he wasn't trying to get out. He was trying to stay away from something that was already inside. This happened about 6 months ago. I live in a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. Nothing isolated, but not crowded either. The kind of place where nights are calm, too calm sometimes. I have a Labrador named Bruno. He's friendly, too friendly. Honestly, the kind of dog that runs up to strangers, tail wagging like he's known them forever. So when he started acting differently, I noticed immediately. It began one evening around 9 p.m. I had just finished dinner and opened the back door to let Bruno in. He had been outside for maybe 15 minutes. Normally, the second I open the door, he rushes in. But that night, he didn't move. He just stood there, right at the edge of the porch, looking at me. Not excited, not distracted, just still. I called his name. Bruno, come on! Nothing. He didn't even step forward. He just looked past me. Not at me. Past me. Into the house. That's when I felt it. That small, uncomfortable shift in the air. Like something inside wasn't right. I turned slightly, following his line of sight. The kitchen looked normal. Lights on. Everything in place. Nothing out of the ordinary. I laughed a little. Come on. What are you doing? Still nothing. Bruno slowly took a step back. Off the porch. Away from the door. That's when it stopped feeling normal. Because Bruno never backs away from me. Never. I stepped outside and grabbed his collar gently. Tried to guide him inside. But he resisted. Not aggressively. Just firm. Like he was planting himself in place. Like he didn't want to cross that doorway. I tried again. Bruno, get inside. He let out a low whine. And that's when I noticed his eyes. Wide. Focused. Not on me. Still looking into the house. Like something inside was holding his attention. Something he didn't trust. I finally managed to pull him inside. But the moment his paws crossed the doorway, he froze. Completely. His body went stiff. Tail dropped. Ears back. And then, slowly, he turned his head. Toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no doors, nothing. But Bruno started backing away. Shane, as before slow. Controlled, like he didn't want to turn his back on whatever he was looking at. I followed his gaze. The hallway was dark, just a faint shadow stretching across the floor. I stepped forward. Hello, no answer. Just silence. I reached for the hallway light switch, flipped it on. Everything looked normal. Empty. Still. But Bruno didn't relax. He didn't move. He just kept staring. And then, he did something I had never seen before. He started growling. Low, continuous. Not loud, but deep. The kind of growl that doesn't come from aggression. It comes from fear. That's when I heard it. A sound. Very faint. Like something shifting its weight. Not footsteps, not a creak. Just movement. From inside the hallway, I stood there, trying to process it, trying to convince myself it was something normal. But then it happened again, a second shift, closer this time. And that's when I saw it, at the very end of the hallway. For just a moment, something moved. Not clearly, not fully visible. Just enough to know something had been standing there, and it had just stepped back. My chest tightened instantly. Because whatever that was, it wasn't leaving the house. It was already inside. Bruno barked. Loud, sharp. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The air felt normal again. The hallway was still, empty, like nothing had ever been there. But Bruno didn't stop staring. Not for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I stayed in the living room. Lights on. TV running. Just to have some kind of noise. Bruno stayed right next to me. Closer than usual. Every now and then, he would look toward the hallway and quietly growl. The next day, I checked everything. Doors locked, windows closed, nothing missing, no signs of anyone entering, no explanation. So I did the only thing I could think of. I installed a camera, pointed directly at the hallway. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, that I would watch it back and realize it was nothing. Just shadows, just imagination. But that night, at exactly 1:48 a.m., the camera recorded something. Bruno was lying beside me, calm, still. And then, suddenly, he lifted his head, stared at the hallway. Just like before, and a few seconds later, something appeared at the end of the hallway, not walking in, not entering, just standing there, like it had always been there. Barely visible, a shape, a presence, and then, slowly, it leaned forward, like it was looking toward the living room. Toward us, toward me, and then the footage cut out. Just black. For about 3 seconds, when it came back, the hallway was empty again. I didn't stay in that house after that. I didn't try to explain it, didn't ask questions. Just left. Because the worst part wasn't what I saw, it was what I realized. Bruno wasn't trying to stay outside that night. He wasn't scared of being alone. He was scared of coming inside, because whatever was in that hallway was already there, waiting, and it didn't need to come in, because it never left.